Recording. Excellent. We have anyone joining on Zoom? We got 4 participants joining by Zoom today. Welcome, Zoom people, whoever you are. I'm not sure. I'll be ready to take a question from you, but hopefully we'll be able to answer all the questions anyway. I think I mentioned that we would spend just a little time at the beginning talking about a quote from the founding of our nation. This one from George Washington after Braddock's defeat. Braddock's defeat, incidentally, one of the first major engagements of the British in the French and Indian War, stands to this day as the worst defeat in British military history. Washington was there. This is really the beginning of the mythology around George Washington. He will, in this battle, as a captain, find himself the ranking officer who will end up effecting an orderly retreat and saving the, of the 1,800 men that went into this battle, British soldiers that went into this battle, 400 survived. And they owe their lives to George Washington for essentially getting them out of there. He will have 2 horses shot out from under him. He will get 4 bullet holes in his coat, but he won't be scratched. And he will then write about this and recognize God's hand as he's writing to his mother. God's hand was on me, protected me, and kept me through the battle. Again, recognizing the providential hand of God there. Okay, we'll close that. And before we jump into today's content, I'm going to introduce a very important person to you. So Matthew, if you would stand up. Ooh, that's right. Yeah.
This semester, and I took this class back in 2019. It's my 4th semester in this class. Oh, thank you. And so if you need any help, just come to me and I'd love to help you. I'm in love with VBA. It's the best thing ever. And you'll start to learn that throughout this class. There's so many things you can do and it's amazing. So keep your ears tuned, listen to Professor Allen. It's a great time. And if you need any help, just message me on Slack or come to my TA hours.
And where do we have those TA hours? Do we have those TA hours posted yet? TA hours posted? Posted on Learning Suite. Okay. We have 2 other TAs, one of which might be able to attend occasionally, but we kind of have now a full complement of TAs, although our last 2 are still in the process of getting officially hired, so they can't quite work yet. All right, now I have been negligent in showing you how to do the assignments for this course. So I had that link kind of in the hidden column and never exposed it to you. So let's go ahead and do the homework. So there's homework due tonight. Let's do it together right now in class. Yeah, hey. Oh, you guys are fantastic. But once we do the homework, you're gonna be like, oh, that was it? And because it's really simple. So, but you won't have to think about it too hard. But step 1 is going to be kind of getting the environment set up. So if we come back to the very first day of the schedule in Learning Suite, there's a video that talks you through what I'm about to show you. So you don't really need to watch this video, but you will need to download this file. So I'll just download that to my downloads folder is just fine. Now, one of the tricks here is that because we are downloading workbooks that have code enabled, Windows is a little bit nervous about what code might be in these workbooks. And so it's always a good idea when you download any of the assignment files, and including this add-in, which we'll talk about here in a minute, to go ahead and open it, like show it in the folder, and then right-click it, go to Properties, and then down here it says, hey, this file came from the computer. It's blocked to help protect this computer, and then just unblock it. Most of the assignments you could do without unblocking the file, but if recollection serves correctly, there's a few that'll be like, no, we're not gonna let you work with that file. So it's probably just a good habit to get into, download, go to the properties of that file, and then unblock. All right. So now this add-in is actually gonna be the tool that does the grading for you for your assignments. So we have to install that into Excel. So I'm going to come here and I'll just have a blank workbook open. I probably don't even really need a workbook open, but I'm going to open up a blank workbook so that I'm kind of looking the same as the rest of you are. And let's give a minute to actually get Excel open. We're still waiting to get Excel open? Anyone? Okay, so give it another second or so. A few seconds. So here's the thing. How many of you took IS 110? Let's look, maybe about half of you here. And so in that environment, also from my educator that could do the automatic grading of your work in Excel, all of the grading engine was actually built into each workbook that you downloaded. And as a result, the VBA project all runs in VBA. The VBA project, this may have changed since those of you might have taken it with the add-in that you had to install in IS 110. This be in the days before the add-in for IS 110. I'm not sure this is even worth discussing. Anyway, the code had to be locked, so you don't get in and fiddle with the grader. But of course, I can't just leave the grader built into the VBA workbook and lock the code because you have to have access to the VBA to write your assignments. And so instead, in this environment, the grader is written into a separate VBA project that we've set up as an add-in. And that's what we're doing now. So we're going to install that add-in, and that add-in is going to be what does the grading in this class. So I am going to choose from the file menu. I'll come down to where it says options. Over here in the left column of the Excel options, I'm going to choose add-ins. And then down here, bottom left-hand corner, it says manage Excel add-ins. I'm going to click on go. So here's like the add-ins that kind of come by default, but we just downloaded one that's not showing here. So I'm just going to choose browse. I'm going to go find where I downloaded that file. For me, it's in my downloads folder. And then I'll just select that Atlas VBA 1_4.xlam, and I'll say OK. So now we've installed that add-in, and it should give us a new tab in the ribbon called Atlas. I think Atlas is an acronym for Automated Technology Learning Assessment System or something like that. And that will then give you the tools that will be available once you have one of the Excel homework files open, one of the VBA homework files open. So I don't even know what these tools will do if you try to open it without having an assignment file open. They may have an error. Any questions on getting the add-in installed? Question here?
It's not really about getting it installed, but if we were to delete it from our downloads folder, would it still work?
If you delete that from the downloads folder, it's going to fail. So you'll need to, if you want to clear out your downloads folder, put it somewhere else, like uncheck it first and then go put it somewhere else and then reinstall it, keep it around. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
So we'll go through this process each time we have an assignment by adding or installing add-in.
So the question is, will you have to go through this process for each assignment? And the answer is no. This add-in should get you through the whole semester. Now, there are some of the things that the assignments that we do in this class that kind of depend on what's happening online, on the internet. And so if something happens that I have to actually change the rules for the grading, then I'll have to say, okay, we're going to release version 1.5 and you'll have to download and install it. But I'm not anticipating that happening. Okay, so now we should be able to go get the assignment file. So if I was to go, let's see, how do I get there from here? Oh, I guess I just come to the schedule, create a web query, and then I'll follow the link to the assignment on my educator. And then here's the file to download. If you've already downloaded this file and it has a different file name than R1 here on this little version, you might have one that is Q something. Then you'll need to download again. So I did need to make a change in this file. I think I did it about a week ago. So I'll download that file. And I'm going to go through that same process. I'm going to make sure that I've unblocked the file. So I'll open it, show in the folder, right-click it, choose properties, unblock. Then I can just double-click that to open it in Excel. And we see now I've got that file open. Now that the homework file is open, if I come to the Atlas tab and click on instruction sheet, that should open up the it killed Excel. That's awesome. Let's try that again. It should open up the instructions sheet in a browser. Haven't made any changes. Atlas. Are you getting that same problem on your machines? It's working okay for you. You're getting it. You're
I did get it, but then it just shut it down, but it didn't actually close it. It just did like everything. So then I just had to open it all back up.
interesting, because my Excel looks like it's really, really dead. I'm going to try one more thing here. I'm going to open Excel. I'm going to make that location a trusted location in Excel. So blank worksheet. This is a trust center thing that I didn't think we needed to do, but I may need to do on this computer. Choose options, trust center settings. Don't do this along with me, at least unless you have a similar problem, then I'll help you do it. Trusted locations, add a new location. And I'm not sure making your downloads folder a trusted location is the brightest idea. But I'm really more interested right now in getting this example working. Trust center settings don't all kind of take effect immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and close Excel again. I'm going to cross my fingers. Create a web query, this one. Oh. Okay, is anyone else having this problem besides me? A few of you. I'm going to have to track this down. I don't know what it is. And so hopefully we'll get there. So I guess that means I got to extend the homework. So since I can't show you doing the homework today, why don't we go ahead and extend that homework until next Monday? And well, look, it'd be so much better if we could just finish it. I'm not sure that's worth clapping for. Okay. So, hey, Matthew, would you go ahead and extend that both in Learning Suite and My Educator? Oh, hey, that's a really great idea. Bring it up here. Can you join the Zoom meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that. And that way we can share your screen and then the folks that are on Zoom can see it happen as well. So go to Learning Suite, go to the online tab and join the Zoom meeting.
Here's the trusted location setting. So try to put others downloads.
Oh, really? So it really just doesn't like downloads at all. Okay, we'll give that a shot. So let me go ahead and find a more reasonable place to put this. I'll make a new folder. Make sure that I have these. Okay, that's unblocked. That's unblocked. Open up Excel. Oops. I'm going to go change the location of the add-in. File options, trust center settings, trusted locations, add a new location. Trusted. Install the add-in again. Yeah. Okay. Were you able to join the meeting? Hopefully you haven't joined the audio. And I'll let you share your screen. So I'll stop sharing. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can get through this. We'll still extend the deadline here for those of you that are having the same troubles I'm having on the podium. Thank you. All right, hopefully this works out for the folks on Zoom. Okay, so let's go ahead and open Excel. And can I close this? Yeah. Oh, let's see. Okay. I'll close. Save that. Okay. So let me delete this. This should be about where we're starting. So we've got the assignment open in Excel. We've got the Atlas add-in here. We're going to show the instructions. That'll bring those instructions up in a browser. And so this is normally the way the assignments are going to work. Hopefully I can get that figured out on these podium computers. And for those of you who are struggling with this as well. So there's little 10 points here. It says use the legacy web query wizard to bring in a quote from the founding fathers. Here's the URL that you're going to go to. So I'm going to copy that. Actually, if you just type desk.gov.net, that'll take you there as well. So don't feel like you have to copy it and get to the instructions to make this work. Desk.gov.net. And so that just brings a randomly chosen quote from some maybe 1,000 or so quotes that I found in a database somewhere. If I refresh this page, then it should draw a different quote. So when you go to that page, it just displays one at random. So the whole point we're trying to show here is that when we make a web query using the legacy web query, that it's going to actually tell that web page to refresh, that it will part of what it's doing. It's not just doing a static import of data, it's making a connection to that web server that we can then say refresh this and it would bring that data in again. So maybe I'll just go ahead and type that. So let's go ahead and see how to do this. To get to the legacy web query wizard. Now it turns out, let's just take a look at the kind of the current web query wizard. If I come to data and choose from web right here, it's going to open up a tool that will let us bring in data from a website. This new tool, if I click on it, this was introduced in 2017, and it's really a great environment. It really improves some deficiencies that are in the legacy web query wizard. But the problem is that the code that gets recorded when we record ourselves doing this process is more complex than I want to put you into right now. Halfway through the semester, you'll be able to look at that code and go, yeah, I totally got it. But we're just beginning at this. And it happens that the legacy web query wizard records really simple code. And so we're going to use the legacy version of this today, and here's how we get to it. So instead of using data from web, I'm going to come up to where it says, no, there's no macro involved for this homework assignment. So this macro is just, the idea here was that I wanted you a little bit familiar with legacy web query wizard so that we didn't have to spend this time in class getting you familiar with it. That was the plan originally. Okay, so I'm just gonna try to move my Zoom controls out of the way a bit here. That should do it. Okay, so right up here, I'm just gonna type in web. And then I should see from web, that would just take me to the one we just opened. I'm gonna go to the one that is from web legacy. And that will then bring up the old style web query wizard, which is really bad at handling dynamic content. So in terms of being able to run JavaScript and render that, it's terrible. That's okay. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna say, no, don't keep running scripts. It will keep running scripts anyway, but I'll say no every time. Then I'll come up here and I'll put in desk.gov.net. And then that should take us to that same page there. Once I've gotten to the page that I want, I'm just going to say import. There's some arrows up here that kind of on a more complex page would let you select different parts of the page. I'm going to recommend you don't ever use those. And I'll show you a different way to deal with the data. Question here. You cannot do this on a Mac. There is no web query wizard on the Mac. So yeah, for that, you'd have to have Windows installed on your Mac. So I'll say import. It'll ask me where I want to put it. I think the instructions tell you to put it in beginning in A1. We'll say OK. It'll make the request and bring that data in. If I were to right-click this and format this cell, this is not part of the assignment, but tell it to word wrap, might make it a little bit better. And then, I don't know, maybe we could zoom in a bit. There we go. So now my data tab, if I come here and click refresh all, then because that is a web query, when I say refresh all, it changes the data that's on the worksheet. So that's the whole idea for the web query, is to be able to have to configure this object in Excel so that it knows to talk to a particular server. And when we say refresh, it brings the data that's currently being displayed on that server. To finish out this assignment, I'm going to come down and change the name of the sheet to say quotes. And that's also an instruction in the assignment sheet. And then I'm ready to submit. So I will choose Atlas, submit, and then provide the same username and password I used to authenticate at my educator, and then that will give you the score. Yes, question in the back. So Matt, did we get the date updated on this?
I just updated it, so it should show. The students did it a couple minutes ago. It might show us late, and I'll leave that. But if they are doing it right now, later.
So it looks like we just got that updated. So if it shows as late, then that'll be step one for Matthew to go through and make sure he's removed any late penalties like that happened there. Other questions? Yes.
Is this now not the Monday to do?
And then I'll still push it back to Monday because we've got a few students here that have kind of the same issue I'm having on the podium. I've never seen it before, so I'll have to track it down. Hopefully I can track it down. Okay. This was Alejandro. Alexandra. Thank you so much. That was a great idea. Go ahead and stop sharing and I'll share my screen again. Okay. So then to go ahead and do then the example that I want to work today, where we are now talking about automating that web query wizard, we're going to start with a blank workbook. So first of all, how many of you successfully submitted that homework here this morning? Okay. How many of you tried to submit, like got up to the submit, and then something went wrong? A few of you. So make sure you contact me and let's get that worked out for you. All right. What we're really after today, we're doing the web query wizard because it's really fantastic to be able to automate a process to go pull data from an outside source and bring it into Excel. That's a really neat thing to do. But what we're really after today is the process that's really, really common, and that is recording a macro. So seeing that we can have Excel write some VBA for us by watching what we do and write the VBA that would accomplish that, and then make some modifications to it. It would be really nice if we could just record it and the macro would work. And for really, really simple things, like if we're just applying some formatting, or maybe we have a worksheet that we want to set up and we're putting data into cells, and we might be able to just record that and never look at the code and just be able to play it back and have it work. But that's the exception. It is much more common that after you've recorded it, you need to go and take a look at the code that you wrote and modify it, either because there's some things you can't record. For example, we're going to want to try to be able to pull in data over and over and over again, like to have a loop that makes this code execute multiple times. There's no way to record that. You've got to add that by hand. Another reason is there's some things that the macro recorder just doesn't record. And there's some things that the macro recorder records wrong. And we're going to bump into that today as well. And so we'll kind of make some modifications and get our feet under us for this. And so here's what we're going to do to start off with. We're going to come to the developer tab. Is there anyone who's not showing the developer tab? Do we need to review how to show the developer tab? For anyone? Okay. So in fact, let's suppose that you get an internship, and your job at this internship is to kind of pull some data regularly from a web page. And you might think, do they really have people do that anymore? Yeah, you're nodding your head. So what's your experience?
So I work for a pest control company, and I'm on there at 18, and that's my only job is just pulling stuff.
So that's the reason you're here, is so that you can make that part of your job better.
Yep.
So the student, for those of you who didn't hear, at a pest control job, and this is a regular thing that he has to do. Go online, and what are you looking at? Prices from suppliers, competitors?
Typically, it's internal reporting, so it's things like customers that we have, we need to look up their information, how much they're paying, and then project.
So you've got a main interface that you interact with. Some of the corporate data is actually through a web browser, and you've got to go kind of pull together reports that way. Yeah, I was really surprised not long ago, maybe 3 years ago, when I had a former student come back to me, came to my office, knocked on my door. Hey, Professor Allen, just got back from the internship. I thought you'd like to hear what happened. I said, I'd love to hear what happened. Come in, sit down. He said, I interned at Amazon. I said, that's great, and that's a great place to intern. I mean, it's kind of great on your resume, and hopefully you learn some good stuff there too. Well, it turns out that his internship was to every day go and look at competitors' sites to see how they're selling stuff. And I thought, you got to be lying to me. This guy is making this up, because of all the companies in the whole world that have to have a great competency to do this automatically. It's got to be Amazon. If they're not the best, they're in the top 3, right? Because Amazon needs to be competitive, and so they've got programs that automatically go out and check prices and such at other competitors' website. And we'll come to find out he had been hired by the whatever division deals with digital cameras. And I had no idea that digital cameras were special this way. But if you're going to be an authorized retailer for Canon or Nikon selling their high-end cameras, you've got to agree not to sell those cameras below a certain price. So the price that you sell it at, there's a bottom. You can go above that all you want, but you can't go below it. They're kind of protecting what these cameras sell at. And so how are you going to, so you really can't compete on price in that market. How are you going to compete? You're bright people. How might you compete in a market where you're contractually obligated not to go down below that price? You're online. How are you going to compete? Okay, so maybe providing other services will get it there, really quick. That's possible. Free overnight shipping on this camera. That's one thing. That's not how they do it. Yeah. Bundling is exactly what they do. And so where competition happens in this particular market is, yeah, you're going to buy this camera, this high-end Nikon camera, and it's going to be the price that it's everywhere else, but we're going to throw in great stuff. We're going to throw in a tripod, and we're going to throw in some SD cards, and we're going to throw in some kind of flash and some kind of remote. I don't know, but that's the idea. And of course, that's an unusual way to compete in an online market. And so the normal stuff that they have for Amazon wasn't working for here. And so this department is like, we'll talk to IT and tell them to come over here and write something for us. They came over and looked at it and they said, yeah, we can set that up for you. It's going to cost you, it's going to take us a year, and it's going to cost $100,000. So they said, forget it, we'll hire an intern. And we'll have the intern do it. This is exactly what happened. And so he said he started on Monday. Maybe he started Wednesday. I don't know how you could last a whole week doing this, but his internship was click, 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 same as yesterday. Looking at the competitors, click, 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 same as yesterday. Click, 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 same as yesterday. This is it. And he said by the end of the week, he was ready to end it all. I don't know what he meant by that, but he was ready to end it all. And so he went home on Friday, and he said, Friday night, because I just kept thinking, this is the stuff we did like in the very first of class at VBA class. And so he said, till late that night, I worked on automating this process with Excel. I worked on it all day Saturday. I worked on it all day Sunday. I said to him, wait, you didn't go to church? He said, no, I didn't go to church. I said, don't tell me, tell your bishop. And by Monday morning, he goes to work and he has this working. Now, what does working really mean? It means it works. I'm probably going to still run into errors, but he's the programmer. Who bumps into an error that he's not expecting, he can fix it. But he's got it going. Now, what do you think? Supervisor impressed? Yeah. The supervisor is like, of course, you're going to show this off. You did this over the weekend. You're going to show this off. Might have been a better idea to keep it quiet. I don't know. Just keep it quiet. Watch Netflix. Push the button every once in a while. I don't know. Anyway, showed his supervisor, and his supervisor was like, "You did this over the weekend?" And he's like, "Yeah, not a big deal. Just a little VBA code, whatever." And so that was the end of his internship. Click, click, click. They pivoted his internship to, well, if you can automate this, come over here and automate this. Come over and automate this. That's what he spent his internship doing, was kind of going around and figuring out how to automate all this stuff. Did he get a full-time offer? Oh yeah. In fact, when I talked to him about it, he said, "Yeah, but I don't think I'm going to take it." That was kind of amazing. Okay. But I talked to, then I told this story in a later class, and a buddy of his said, no, he ended up taking it. So interesting. Now, but a little warning here. I had a BYU student, wasn't even one of my students, but knew I was the VBA guy, probably talked to one of his other professors and said, yeah, go talk to Brother Allen about that. He was hired somewhere here on campus, like for a summer job. And it was something where they had to go through this really complex file structure, find all these files and do some kind of conversion process on them. But it was really labor intensive to find the right ones and so forth. And so he said, hey, will you come here and help me with this? And I thought, yeah, if it was a former student of mine, I wouldn't have even considered it. It would have been, yeah, come on in, let's sit down and work together. But he wasn't even one of my students. So I think I needed help setting up for some kind of a volunteer activity I was sponsoring. And so I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll help you with this. You come help us set up, next week. And so that was great. So we did what he needed in about 3 hours. We had it working, and he was able to finish his internship, everything they wanted to do on his internship that night. He ran the program and it did everything. And so I was thrilled. So a week later, we're setting up at this volunteer event together, and he's there helping us set up chairs and everything. I said, hey, how did everything go? He says, well, it's an interesting story. I went in and showed him that I had kind of completed the internship, and they said, wow, that's really amazing, but that's why we hired you. There's nothing else to do, you're fired. And I was like, you're kidding me. I thought, these guys, at least give him something else to do, find something else productive for this guy to do. So I don't know, are you gonna tell everyone what you've done here when you automate something? I don't know, it's up to you, but be careful. Okay, so let's suppose that you've got to go get some kind of information, publicly available information, or it could be information that comes off of some kind of corporate system that's there inside of some kind of a web browser interface. Let's go to finance.yahoo.com. And I'm going to come to a quote lookup here. I'm just going to put in Delta Airlines, DAL. And so here we have Delta Airlines. I would like to have one that actually is showing a price earnings ratio. I'm not quite sure why this is not showing a price earnings ratio. Perhaps you guys who are like finance majors could tell me that.
Because the earnings are negative.
Because the earnings are negative. That would explain it. Thank you. So let's go to something that doesn't, let's go to the airline industry because they're probably all negative earnings here. Let's try Google. They're probably, they're not negative. They're down for today. That's what the red is, but their earnings aren't negative. Okay. So let's just suppose that that is your job is you've got this list of tickers and every day you got to go find out some information about them. That's kind of the example that we're going to have here today. So by the way, as I'm kind of looking at this URL, I'm going to go ahead and kind of bring this into Notepad so that you can see it a little bit better. Here's the URL. As you look at that URL, is there anything that looks unusual to you about this? There's something that looks really strange to me here. Okay, so the question mark is not that strange. Let's talk about the little parts of this first. This first part right here is the protocol. So this says, this is a kind of, hey, how is the server and the browser going to talk to each other? What are the rules that we're going to agree on? This next part here, up to the next slash, is the host. This gets us to a machine that we're going to be talking to. So this identifies a particular computer. And then everything up to the question mark identifies a resource on that computer. That gets us to a file or to a folder that's some file that we're trying to invoke there. The question mark then says everything after that is instructions that go to that resource. So we're running something on this server located at this location, and we're telling it, we're going to give it a variable p equals goog. Okay, but there was a comment in the back. Did someone kind of see what I'm looking at that looks a little unusual?
Well, doesn't the S in protocol typically get
Actually, the S here means that the communication, it stands for secure, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol secure. It means that the communication that goes back and forth between the server and the browser is encrypted. You do not have to be logged in. That does not mean you have to be logged in. What it means is that as things are going back between these two computers, the data is encrypted. In fact, it's very, very few websites still are now running on HTTP, allowing traffic to be unencrypted. So they're almost all HTTPS now. But the part that's interesting to me is that, look, it specifies Goog here, and it specifies Goog again here. And the thing that I'm kind of immediately wondering is, do we even really need that? Could I just take that URL, drop it into a browser, and would that bring up the same information? And yeah, we're looking at Alphabet Inc. It's the same page. So one of the things that you might want to begin with is saying, all right, let's take a look at that URL. And is there anything interesting in the URL that we can kind of look at? In this case, I'm just simplifying it because it's going to make the next thing that we do a lot simpler. But you might be able to see parameters in it. You realize, oh, I could just send a different URL and I can figure out the page I need to do just by modifying the URL. And that can be really helpful as well. So I'm going to work with this as the URL. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come back to Excel and I'm going to make a web query. I'm going to use that same legacy web query. So I'm going to look for web, from web. Whoops, wrong one. I got to do from web legacy. From web legacy. Oh, and the truth is, before we paste that URL in, I think that finance.yahoo.com has become kind of complex enough that it's probably going to cause some of you to fail getting this web query altogether. So instead, let's just go to that same one that I know is really simple because it's a page that I wrote. Just go to desk.gov.net. And import. I just want to get a web query here. I'm not terribly worried about, and I'm going to put it in A2. I'm not terribly worried about what the web query is, but I want to get the objects. So we now have created some objects on this sheet that are going to allow us to interact with that web query. Questions to this point? Question here. Just, yeah, desk.gov.net. It's actually a computer that's running in my office that's serving that web page. We just want to get a web query here on a sheet. In fact, I'm going to name this sheet. I'm going to name this sheet web query. Web query. Whoa. Oh, query. Okay. Now, to build out this example a little bit more, so I've got the web query. Let me go ahead and kind of build another sheet to work with. So I'll make another sheet here, and I'll go ahead and name this one. I'm going to name this one tickers. And let's just suppose that what I'm after here is we've got to have some symbol, some ticker symbol. I'm going to want to know the price earnings ratio. And I'm going to want to know the earnings per share. And let's put in a few here. Goog. I guess I'll put them in all caps. It won't matter, but I'll put them in all caps. Google, Apple, American Express, ExxonMobil, Ford, GM. We can have others. So this is the task, is that we're going to work with, we're going to want to get this information. Now there's only 6 of them here. Would I go get these 6 by hand instead of writing a program to do it? Probably, if I only had to do it once. If I had to do it every day, I'd definitely write a program to do it. If I had to get not 6, but I had to get 600, I would definitely write a program to do it. And so that's the goal then for the rest of the class today, is to be able to record ourselves getting this information for one of those tickers, and then to automate it so it'll go into all of them. You ready? Let's go ahead and do it. Okay, so we've got the web query here that it exists. We're going to record ourselves changing the web query. We don't want to record ourselves creating the web query, because each time we run the macro, it's going to create a new web query. I don't want that. I just want to have the one web query there, and then I'll change it each time that we get there. So I'm going to come to tickers now, and I'm getting ready to record. So on my developer tab, I'm eyeing the record macro button longingly, but I'm not going to click it yet, because there are 2 things that I want to think about before I start recording. And the first one is, when the user runs this macro, which cell should the user be on when they run it? And whatever is the answer to that question, that's where I'm going to start when I start recording. And the second one is, when this macro is done running, where should it leave off the active cell? And I'll make sure that I put it there when I'm done. So I'm looking at this problem. What do you think? What's a good place for us to start? What cell should we have the user be on to start? A2 is a really great answer. But equally good is A3 or A4 or A5, because what we're going to do is we're going to record ourselves getting the information from one of these ticker symbols, and then we're going to make it happen over and over again. So it doesn't matter which one we're on, but that's the way the user is going to say, this is the one I want you to get. That's going to be what's in the active cell. Okay, so let's say we are in A2. When we're done getting that information, which cell should we leave the active cell to be? What should be the active cell when we're done recording? Yeah, A3, the next cell down. Why? Because then I could just run it again. I could run it again, run it again, run it again. It's kind of setting it up for the next run. Excellent. Okay, so now that I've thought about those 2 questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my macro recorder. So I'll click record macro, and it's going to say, hey, you better give us a name for this. And I'm going to say, great. I'm going to call this stock info. And then, see, shortcut, this is called stock info, shortcut key. Oh, how about Control S? That sounds good. I'll make Control S the shortcut key for this. Wait a minute, Control S sounds familiar. What does Control S do? Not anymore, it doesn't. Now Control S runs this macro. Okay, do you see why you don't want my mother doing this at all? Yeah, I mean, she'd probably make some macro and call it Control P, and my printer won't print, my computer won't print anymore, you know, or something. So I got to tell you this. Do I have time to tell this little story? I don't. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so instead of putting a lowercase s, I'll put an uppercase s, and now the keystroke will be Control Shift S. By the way, in Excel, there is only one of the 26 letters that is not mapped to a control character, and that's M. So if you want to do Control M, you could get by with that without overriding built-in functionality. And that happens to be for macro, I guess. I don't know why they left Control M undone, but there you go. Yep.
So then when you're outside of this spreadsheet, Control S will still run this macro, or?
So if this workbook is open and you've got this set up with Control S, it will invoke the macro. If it's closed, you're okay. But if it's open, it's going to run it, which regardless which one's active. Question here? I put the capital S in. So the question is, how did it change to Control plus Shift plus S? I put in a capital S and then it changed there. Question? No? Okay. And then a little description, get data from finance.yahoo.com. Right, now I gotta be very careful because as soon as I click OK, everything that I do is gonna get recorded. Well, the truth is, even before you click OK, everything you do is being recorded in heaven. But now it's gonna get recorded by Excel too, so be on your guard. Okay, so, and before I'm clicking OK, I have already activated the cell that I want to be the active cell. So we're in good shape there. I'll say OK. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy the active cell. So I'm going to press Control C, or however you copy from the ribbon. And now it is just recorded. In fact, let me do this. I'm going to split this screen. Can I open this up? I wonder if it's going to record opening the editor. Don't try to do this, but I'm just going to show you that we can see this getting recorded as it happens. So it has made a sub procedure called stock info, and it's already recorded the step for the first thing that I'm doing. So I copied that. Now I'm going to select the web query page. And it's going to record that line. You can kind of see it happen as it goes. Okay, so it's going, all right, yeah, you want to select that. Here's how you do it. You identify all the sheets. There's this collection called sheets. Web query is the name of the sheet, and then that's the object we're identifying, and then the method we're identifying here is select. And the same thing here, object and method. Okay, so now I'm gonna want to put what I just copied into cell A1. So if you happen to have A1 active, you've got to click off of it and click back on it. It's smart enough to realize you kind of click around, but all that other stuff is like not necessary. So it's only going to remember the last one that you did. And then I'm going to paste. Now it recorded something a little bit interesting here, right? We got this select A1, ActiveSheet.paste. So you don't actually, the paste isn't a method of a cell. It's a paste is a method of the sheet. So it says identify the sheet and call the paste method. This one seems a little bit weird, but this is the one that takes you out of cut copy mode. You know, when you press Control C, you get like little dancing ants that are kind of walking around the cell that's active. That's cut copy mode. And your Excel behaves a little differently when you're in cut copy mode, because if you press enter, it pastes. Normally enter doesn't paste, but when you're in cut copy mode, it does paste. And so when I hit enter here, it pasted and took me out of cut copy mode. If you pressed Control V to paste, you didn't get the cut copy mode false, but that'll come in when we do something else that causes us to come out of that mode. Okay, so now I'm going to edit the macro. So I'm going to select A2. I've got to be on a cell that I'm going to edit the query, edit the web query. So I'm going to come over here to A2, and I'm going to right click and choose edit query. And so it's getting ready to record all this stuff about this query, but it's waiting. Remember when I said that everything you do is going to get recorded? That's not entirely true. When you get to a dialog box, the macro recorder says, oh, a dialog box. I can see you need a little private time here. I'll avert my eyes. And it doesn't pay attention to what you're doing in the dialog box, but when you're done, when you click OK, or in this case, when you click import, it takes a look at how that was configured and it says, that's what we're after. And it records that, which means that if I was to even kind of paste in that whole URL here, it wouldn't record that it's specifically, I mean, it would record a particular one. Well, I have to edit that URL anyway. And because kind of going into that page is going to be a little bit, it'd be a bad experience because this wizard doesn't do a good job with it. I'm just going to say, you know what, this is enough right here. This is going to get the code that I need. Let me go ahead and just click import. So we haven't quite gotten to the code that we're after yet, but we now got this part recorded. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop recording for now. We're going to start recording again in just a minute. But let me go ahead and hit stop recording. And let's take a look at the code that we have here. In fact, you'll want to edit this code. So let's see how we're going to edit that code. Easiest way to find this code is to come to your developer tab, choose your list of macros. This is the button right next to the record macro button. And you should only have the one macro here. Choose edit. And that will open up the Visual Basic environment and take you directly to that macro. So there's a couple of things that we want to do here. The first one is going to be that I want to bring in the real URL that I'm trying to plug in here. So let me go ahead and go full screen on this. So here we see this construct right here says, hey, we're going to do a bunch of things with a particular query. In this case, it's a web query. Why is it a web query? Because when I look at the connection, it starts off with the URL. That's the part that says this is a web query. I'm going to leave that URL semicolon in place, and I'm going to paste in the ticker for, or the URL that's going to get me to the page I'm really after. As it turns out, this web query will pull that page in just fine. This object pulls it in okay. It's the wizard that has the problem running that dynamic content. That's where the errors come from. So that's why we're kind of skipping having that wizard try to get to this page. Just kind of recording it with a really simple URL and then dropping the one in that we want here. Now, in fact, we don't need the slash on the end. This works just fine without the slash on the end. But you can see that if I was to run this, it would every time bring in the information from Google. But I don't want every time for me to Google. What do I want? Yeah, whatever's in range A1. Because what did I do? I started off by saying, copy the cell that I'm on, put it into this sheet on A1, and now let's just tell it to look at A1 to get that value. So when we look right here, what we're seeing is that the connection is what we call a string literal. String is one of the data types we talked about last time. It's a collection of characters. And so a string literal is identified by double quotes. So it's inside of double quotes. And we're saying this is just the connection of the collection of characters that we want VBA to keep track of. Look, everything else we're looking at on this page, like when we say active sheet here, VBA is looking at that and is trying to figure out, what do you mean by active sheet? And it goes, oh, I got it. It's whatever sheet in this workbook is active. And you're identifying, it's figuring out, you mean this thing here. But for this string literal, we're trying to tell VBA, don't try to understand this. This is not meant for you to understand. This is meant for you just to hold on to. And you'll send it somewhere else to be understood. You just got to keep track of it. And so that's what those quotes around it say. It tells these quotes, say, when you look at this VBA, don't you try to understand this. It doesn't mean anything to you. This means something to something else. In fact, it means something to the query object. So I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to get rid of the goog, and I'm going to concatenate with an ampersand symbol. I'm going to say get whatever's in range A1. So range, and then in quotes A1 dot value. So object, range A1 identifies the object. Dot value identifies the property I want. That'll be whatever is in there. So now this should pull in the information that we want for whichever ticker symbol we've put into A1. That's really great. If I were to run this right now, this line would give me an error. Let me go ahead and run it and I will prove it to you. Now, we're assuming that we are on the list of tickers when I run this. So let me make sure that's where I am. don't run this yet on your own. We're going to have you fix it first. I want you to see the problem. So I'm going to come to the tickers. I'm going to come here to Apple and I'll run this. Just over here, I'll click play. You can see that it put Apple over here in A1. That part was okay. I'm going to hit debug and it's got to this point right here. I have no idea what it's trying to do with this line. Up until 2013, this line did not get recorded by the macro recorder. And with the 2013 release, it started recording this and it didn't work after that. Why haven't they fixed it? I don't know. I guess they've kind of given up on this tool, but we are going to just get rid of that line. Now, you could delete the whole line, or you could just use a single quote, because a single quote is how you mark a comment in VBA. So if we look up here, sub, this is a keyword that starts this collection of tool, or this collection of statements to run together. And then all these other lines that start with a single quote that got recorded, this is just informational. It's a note to some future programmer about what this is about. And so by putting the single quote there, we are now saying just ignore that line. This line is no good for anything. We could delete it. But when you're just beginning at this, you're not sure what this is here for. So you think, oh, what would happen if I just got rid of that temporarily? And that way you don't have to actually delete it and then figure out how to bring it back. So now I'm going to go ahead and click play the rest of the way, and it should, still running, it should then change that connection, set up the rest of this stuff, and then this last part right here says, hey, for that web query that we're working with, you're going to refresh the query. In other words, go get the data and bring it in again. Background query is false, the parameter that it's giving to that method that says it's not going to be a background query. If we told it to be a background query, our code would say, hey, go refresh that query, and our code would just keep right on going. But we want that thing to wait. Don't run in the background. We want that thing to wait. We want our code to wait until the data is back, because we're counting on that data to be here. And so it's not going to be a background query. That causes the VBA code to pause here until the query is done running. Now we can see over here that it's brought out a bunch of different information. Does it even look like the right stuff? Oh yeah, here we go. Here's PE ratio for the trailing 12 months. Here's earnings per share for the trailing 12 months. Okay, so now we've modified that web query so that it's bringing in the right data. I think now we're ready to go kind of finish off the last part of this example. We ready to kind of pick it up again? So let me kind of put myself back where I was. I was on A2. So I kind of want to kind of continue this as the same process. And I'm ready to start recording again. So I'm just going to record another macro that will kind of pick up where we left off. And then we're going to join these two macros together. It'll be a piece of cake. So on the developer tab, I'm going to come back and record a macro. So I'm on my web query sheet. I'm on A2. That's where I left off. Record macro. Macro 2 is fine. I'm going to get rid of the name of this macro anyway. I'll just call it macro 2. That's okay. No shortcut key necessary. All right. So now I'm looking for price earnings ratio. Oh, now I forgot what it was. I'm going to go look at it on here. What was the text that it had here? Here it is. Price earnings ratio trailing 12 months. I'm going to copy that. You guys are probably good enough on the keyboard. You could type that in, but I'm going to copy it. And so way down there on the page somewhere is where that is shown. Now on really simple pages, that'll come into the same cell every single time. This page is a little more complex. You know, it's like on row 84 or something. I didn't pay that close attention to it. But next time I run this query, it might come in on row 82 or 87. And so I'm not going to rely on it being in specifically that cell. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be one cell to the right of where it says PE ratio TTM. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to record myself searching for that. So let's just go ahead and search for that text. So I'm going to press Control F. What am I looking for? I'm looking for PE ratio trailing 12 months. And because I want to make sure that I find the cell that contains that, I'm going to say I really want to match case and match the entire contents of the cell. I'm hoping there's not a space on the end of it. But I'll go ahead and that'll, because if I don't have those checked off, it might find that text as a part of some other cell. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking at where that's the whole cell says that. And I'll click Find Next. And then I'll close my search. Go ahead and bring up my date again. So we can see that we now have recorded this find statement with all the parameters. It's looking for TTM and it's configured the way that I had it configured. So it's just found the cell and selected that cell. That's what this statement does. Now, if I click on one cell to the right, it's going to record select cell B100. I don't want B100. I want one cell to the right of the active cell. And so you're already familiar with the difference between an absolute reference and a relative reference from making formulas in Excel. There's a similar notation in recording code. And there's a choice right up here on the developer tab, right below the record macro button. There's one called use relative references. And you can turn this on and off. It changes the way it records. So I'll click that use relative references and you can see that it stays highlighted. So now when I click on one cell to the right, instead of saying B100 select, it's going to say from the active cell, we want to offset 0 rows and 1 column and then select. Ignore this range A1. It lets us do something kind of fancy. It has nothing to do with cell A1. We'll learn about that later. But it's really saying from the active cell, offset 0 rows and 1 column, and then select it. Great. Now I'll copy, and we'll see it. Do the copy statement. Come back to my set of tickers. It'll see there we are. Selected the tickers. And now I'm still on use relative references, and that's what I want, because I don't want to go to B3. I want to go one to the right of my active cell. I'm on relative references. We should be good. And so yeah, from the active cell, we're going to offset 0 rows, 1 column. I'm going to go back to my web query. I really wanted to be sure about this. I might search again for EPS for the trading 12 months, but I'm pretty confident they're going to be right next to each other. So I'm just going to select the next one down, copy it, go back to my tickers. Oh, did I forget to paste? I forgot to paste. Darn it. I'll click one over and then I'll paste. So I missed the one to paste. Did you guys paste without me? Yeah, some of you know he should have pasted there. You know, well, we're not going to like actually tell him he should have pasted, but that's okay. That's going to be a slight modification that I can fix in the code, and you can fix it along with me. Now, am I done? Am I done recording? No, because I want to end up over here on my next ticker. So I'll click that, and now we see we're going to offset 1 row, go down a row, go backwards 2 columns, and select that one. Now I'm ready to stop recording. So let's see, here's the copy. I selected this. No, it's the paste I got to duplicate. Here's the paste. So after I copied, there it is. So there's my ActiveSheet.paste. I copied the selection. I went to the ticker sheet. I offset it, and then I want to paste. So I'll add that line right back in here. So this is the line that I forgot to record. You may have also not recorded that, so I slid that in here. Now, the only problem is, at this point, is that I've got 2 different macros. Right? I've got the first one here that actually has my shortcut key assigned to it that just gets the data, and then we have the end sub, which says, hey, that's the end of this macro. And then I'm starting the next one. Well, I'm just going to get rid of the end of the last one and the start of the first one, and that'll put these into one. So now we've got a sub at the very top, an end sub at the very bottom, and this is now all a part of stock info. So after we get the data, we're going to go straight on to finding and pulling that data over. I think this is going to work now. Let me come over here to American Express, press Control-Shift-S. And it'll take a minute, but it should, well, less than a minute, but it should bring that data in and fill in the information for that one. Control-Shift-S again, and it should bring in the information for ExxonMobil. So yeah, negative earnings, I guess, and so there's no price earnings ratio. Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Can I see your URL?
Yes. So yeah, and this is going to be really picky. Semicolons got to be there. Have all the rest of this just going to be the same. Well, since the guy's probably still looking at the URL, I'll scroll down a little bit. Oh, he's done. Okay. Is there where you want to be? Question here? The question is, how did we get to the offset instead of actually selecting the particular cell? And that was when we're recording, we have this use relative references. So by clicking on use relative references, then it says record with this offset approach. Taking it off would go back to recording with the absolute reference to the cell. So this is the process that you get familiar with. It is recording and then coming in and saying, all right, I got to make some changes. In this case, I didn't really mean to forget to paste, but it was kind of nice to say, oh, I forgot to paste, but I don't have to start again to do that. I can kind of find where that line should have been and put it in. It happened that I copied something really similar to it. I was able to track it down and know exactly the code to use. Other questions? Well, you know, if I only have to run this a few times, I'm probably just going to hit Control-Shift-S, 7 times, 6 times to get this data. But if I've got 600 of these to do, my pinky is going to get tired pressing Control-Shift-S for a half hour or so. And so I want to be able to tell this, hey, do this over and over again. So we're going to make some modifications to the code. In fact, I'm going to leave stock info just exactly the way it is. And I'm going to make another sub procedure. This one I'm going to write from scratch. I'll just call it sub, and I'll call it maybe get all data. When I hit enter, the VBA editor is going to say, oh, you've got a sub. You're going to have to put that opening and closing parentheses that go with the sub. It's part of the syntax. We'll learn if they're for later in class. And you're going to have an end sub. But when I hit enter, it's going to do that automatically for me. That's pretty good. So I like stock info just the way it is, because if I'm on one single ticker, I can just run that one and it brings in the data for that one. So I don't really want to modify this one, but I would like to use this as a part of a solution that will get all of them for me. Now, for the one that we have recorded so far, you've got to be on a particular cell. But to get them all, I want to start on A2. In fact, I want to make sure I'm on the right page even. So I'm going to start off by selecting my tickers page. I think I've got somewhere where I'm selecting the tickers. Yeah, so here's a statement that says, select the tickers sheet. And you could type it or copy it. I'm just going to start off. When I run this one, I want to say, select that ticker sheet. And then I want to tell it, hey, go select A2. So when I run this one, make sure I'm on the right sheet. Take me to the right cell, that top cell, to get running. And then I want to tell it to run to actually do the whole thing that's in stock info over and over and over again. And so the way I do that is I just say call stock info. And so I'm calling that procedure. So now it doesn't do it over and over again yet. It just does it once. But when I run this one, like we should be able to run it. Go ahead and kind of push this over to 1/2. I'm on the web query sheet here, but when I run this one, it's should bring in the information for Google. It took me to that page. It's not really, you're not really seeing the screen updating. That's Excel trying to be a little more efficient about how it does this. But when it's finished, it's brought in that data. So now I just need to tell it to keep doing that, keep bringing in the data until we're out of data. We ready to do that, or questions? Okay, so instead of just saying call stock info, I'm going to put this line inside of a loop. So a loop is the general programming term for saying I'm going to make this code execute multiple times. The syntax in VBA is really simple. I'm going to say do. Interestingly enough, the statement do doesn't do anything. All it does is it says, whoops, it says, I am the beginning of a loop. It's just a marker. It says, this is the beginning of the loop. That's all it says. Sometime later, you're going to tell me to go back here, and I'm going to know this is the place you're going back to. I'm now going to, at the end of what I want to happen over and over again, I'm going to put loop. Loop says, go back to the prior do. So now when I run this, how long is that going to execute? Forever is a really long time. It will not run forever. It will run until something really unexpected happens. It will run until a nuclear holocaust. It will run until the second coming. It will run until someone pulls the power out of the wall, until something really unexpected happens. In this case, my code goes down one row every time. It takes about 2 seconds to run, and it goes down a row. Goes down a row. How many rows are there on a worksheet? 1.04 million. And so after about a month of running, it would try to move past the end of the sheet, and it would go, you can't do that, error, stop. But the point is, we haven't given it a way out, and we need to give it a way out. And so I'm going to come here to where it says loop, and I'm going to put an until clause, until then the condition that I'm looking for. Well, let's go until the active cell equals, and let's just kind of pick one of these. Why don't we just do it until the active cell equals AXP? This is not really where we're headed in this, but I'm going to clear this data out. That won't take too long to run. I'll go ahead and run this. And it should bring in the information for Google. It should bring in the information for Apple, and then it should be done. Because it will get to this condition when the active cell is AXP. And at the end of this loop, when it's going to check, it's going to say, is this condition true? Active cell equals AXP. That's either true or false. And if it's true, they'll say we're done. So you can see that it took me down, activated that cell, it checked this condition and said we're done. So I could put something that I'm expecting to be able to know when I'm to the end of the list. I could come in here and put stop. And then I would come over here and put stop. But the problem with that is, for all I know, stop is a valid stock ticker. So maybe instead of doing that, maybe I should put, whoops, maybe I should put stow, but that could be a valid stock ticker, or that, or I could go all the way to that. This is a really strange thing. It's two quotes right next to each other. It's a string literal with no characters in it. And that's exactly what an empty cell is. So here I'm saying just keep doing this until the active cell is empty. There are other ways for us to tell if a cell is empty. This is just kind of the one of the stuff we've learned so far. This is the easiest way for us to get there. Is there a question?
Yeah. So it waited until all the information was available to kind of show up in Excel. Does it store that information before it shows up? Or?
Yeah, the question is, it didn't show all that information until it was done running. And the answer is, one of the most expensive things that we do computationally here is updating the screen. Right? I mean, if you buy a really, really expensive PC today, what is it designed for? What does it do? You buy the most expensive PC you can buy, what is it meant to do? Someone knows the answer to this. It's for playing video games. Yeah, and that's because it's all about getting that power to get 60 or 120 updates of that screen per second to be able to get a really, really fluid motion, because that is computationally intensive. And so what VBA is doing here is it's saying, well, this thing is running, don't update the screen. So all these things that we're doing, it's saying activate the screen, activate this cell, those are all expensive to do. And so it's saying don't update it. So it's actually storing it in the model, in the spreadsheet, in those cells. You're just not seeing it until it's done running. Now, we can tell it at this point, go ahead and update the screen. So you could see it happen along, but we're out of time. That's usually beyond what I try to do on this at this point anyway. Question in the back? I'm going to post the code on the blog. You know how to get to the blog? Yeah, so the whole workbook will be there. This video will be posted there later today. Yeah. Question in the back?
I run mine, it updates after each row. Like every 5 seconds, it'll give me the rows, and then 5 seconds later, like it does it one at a time.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that you're actually getting a better update of the screen than I am. Could be a different setting or a different version of Excel that you're running. So, other questions? Last question, then we'll dismiss. That is correct. So the question is, I'm calling the second macro from the first one, and the answer is it happens right here. So this macro that we recorded is called stock info. I say call stock info, and that says go and run that one. Once it's done, it comes back, gets to the loop, goes to the top, and hits this again. Loops through there.
Where are you calling
Oh, here, I'm just hitting play.
I thought for things together, both process.
All right, let's go ahead and call that good and we'll handle any other questions offline. Thanks for coming, folks. We'll see you next week.